Hey, what's up, dude? It's me, Mr. Airon here, the cool dude here. Welcome back to my second channel of another video of the history buff channel. So in today's video, I'm gonna be learning you guys about both the Kingdom of Prussia from 1701 to 1871, and the State of Prussia from 1526 till 1947. And today in this video presentation, we're gonna be covering over the about the culture and like basically the power and the military strategies into the battles and the wars and the conflicts and the rise of power of the Kingdom of Prussia and what leads to its fall. So if you guys want to see more videos just like this, then what are you waiting for? Please be sure to like, subscribe to my channel if you're new. Don't forget to comment and turn on my bell notifications. That way you get notified by every video that I'll be posting in this second channel. And yeah, so let's get to it. All right, so what is about the Old Prussians? So the Old Prussians were inhabited by the Baltic Prussians that are on the southern shore of the Baltic Sea. That are the between the Vistula and the lagoon to the west of the Karelian lagoon and to the east. The Baltic Prussians were the traded, accepted Christianity, and resisted by Polish invasions until the German states under King Frederick II, they wanted to basically have interest on the conquests, in which they led into basically of the Prussian Crusade by the 1230s to the 1240s. That basically of their introduced of the Teutonic Knights that basically could then later conquer the state known as they be later known as the Kingdom of Prussia. So then you have the Prussian Crusade. So that's the Prussian Crusade. So the Germans and Knights who are basically trying to conquer the old Prussians. The Emperor of Frederick I agreed for the conquest, and the Prussian Crusade series of the 13th century campaign for the Roman Catholic Crusaders, primarily for the Teutonic Knights, to Christianize under the dress the pagan Old Prussians, which were carved a state known as Prussia. The Polish king Władysław I had asked the Teutonic Knights to help him to gain the region, but the Teutonic Knights refused. So the Polish-Teutonic War, there was wars against the Polish and the Teutonic Wars try to take control of the land of Romania from 1326 to 1332, but the Teutonic Knights had the interest of control or their influence on the conquered territory. The war ended with the Treaty of Kalitz, but the Teutonic Knights had, on the upper hand, had control of Poland's seaports. And there was also the Polish-Lithuanian under the Teutonic War, and that the Polish-Lithuanian Teutonic War was also a war between with the Teutonic Knights and the Polish-Lithuanians. That they were with the Lithuanians that between 1409 to 1411, between the Teutonic Knights and the allied Kingdom of Poland and the Grand Duchy of Lithuania, that inspired by the social Psychomegian uprising, a war that began with the Teutonic invasion of Poland in August of 1409. So then there was the famous battle of the medieval era, known as the Battle of Grunwald, which is basically the battle that's between like the forces of the Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth against the Teutonic Order, that marked a turning point in the history of the Central Eastern Europe, halting the orders of the expansion, solidifying the Polish-Lithuanian Union's regional dominance, which they were ultimately crushed the Teutonic Knights and their order, and that leads to their Teutonic Order collapse, and that meanwhile that Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth by the 1500s had been expanding to both economic and social and political, and was in social reforms and degrees of the arts and the science and scientific innovations, until in 1569, that's where Poland and Lithuania then formed into what is now becomes the state known as the Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth. And there was also basically before there was war with the Polish with the 13 Years' War, and that the cities were the nobles and the converted against the Teutonic Knights in their desire to join Poland, but the Teutonic Knights were able to crush this rebellion in the 1450s. That they were seen to the powerful force of crushing the Poles in battles like Kunitz in 1454, taking the numerous cities and castles. But the fresh Polish troops arrived to away the war after the Battle of Surino in 1462. The second piece of thorn was assigned to that marked the end of the war. And then there's the rise of the Kingdom of Prussia, the Kingdom of Prussia with the Brunswick, Ansbach, secularized the lands of the Teutonic Order, creating the Duchy of Prussia in 1701. The duchy had become known as the Kingdom of Prussia under Frederick I. And there's the bonus one that was from the 30 Years' War, and that the nuclearists that were of the dynamic powers which the Kingdom of Prussia was then founded, and then became next to the greatest powers, along with the Holy Roman Empire, along with the Austrian Habsburg monarchy. All right, so the next thing in this is that the first of the rulers of the Frederick Williams, which the great elector, and so, but keep in mind before that Brandenburg is also both Protestant and it was both German and too, and that there was led by succeeded by Williams, known as the Great Conqueror, or the Great Elector, which basically he wants to get election to become to the competition over which is next to become the next Holy Roman Emperor. His military and the political achievements that Frederick William was stomach pillar for the Calvinist faith associated with the rising commercial class, oversaw war with the Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth, and then in 1682 he then established over the Prussian African Company, where basically traded resources and slaves to the west coast of Africa. And then there's Frederick, and then until his death in 1688, he was then introduced by Frederick the First, which he was basically best known for he wanted basically to give himself a crown, in which he was then called basically known as the king in Prussia rather than the king of Prussia. This is basically because they didn't have any of the titles other than the king of the Romans. And it was also basically worth noting that basically that the other parts of the Prussian lands were basically controlled by the Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth. That way they didn't have basically confusing titles. But he was during his reign, he was actually basically known for his arts, literacy, and culture until he didn't last long until his death around in 1713. Then he was then succeeded by Frederick William I, because the previous Frederick Williams was basically this one did not had an heir into the throne. But then when he was officially got to the heir to the throne with Frederick Williams I, he issued the Schools Edict of 1717 that basically brought to his school's education throughout his empire, though not entirely exactly, since some of the nobles and peasants didn't have their education, meaning that they had to do forced labor into the crops and to relied on agriculture, meaning that they had to pay taxes, in which many of the peasants got angry, and then so they suddenly had to revolt, and so that they basically some people were not happy with the taxes, and some of them were then to see them suppressed by the king. Until then, that's because due to this military that's had been expanded over by 30,000 men, and that's why he, being the strongest military power of Prussia, he then came the title, the nickname, the Soldier King. But until his death in 1714, he was then replaced by the most famous Prussian of all, known as Frederick II. Otherwise know him as Frederick the Great. He was also who basically modernized the military over 30,000 men. He was known as Actually, wait. Who basically gained over the fame of the military power, and basically that he also conquered first into Silesia from Austria, from Mary Theresa, until he basically led to war against the Austrians, against the battles that were fought over into the Czech region, such as the battles of Wolfsbach in 1757, with crushing the French and the Austrians both into combining the flanks into battle, and to outflank and maneuver against to rush the Austrians. The Austrians were had to pay that, and they were out of morale, and they were basically defeated, and that they basically signed a treaty, which the Maria and Theresa then decided to recognize Silesia that was part of Prussia, in which Frederick the Great was interested in more conquests. He then conquered into the region of Saxony, which would then later lead him into the 7 Years' War, in which then was its most destructive wars in their human history. That basically gone to the lines, and basically grew the conquest of into Saxony. And by the end of the war, it basically got so it basically Sweden to basically give Pomerania back to Prussia, and also how the Russians had also basically conquered basically parts of the east of Prussia, but it was then agreed nicely back to the French emperor to basically give them back, and also revolted basically the French expansion of from the western parts of their lands from the Prussians, but they were able to revolt the French basically back. And here's one of the pictures of basically from like, but the Frederick the because to keep in mind that Frederick the Great was not just a conqueror, he was also basically give also the basically a reformer, and basically also known for giving the arts and cultures and the and as well as the introduction basically of over and also music too. And here's the pictures of one of Frederick the Great's military instructing over the militaries of the basically through the Austrian against the Austrians and many of the Silesian wars into the to conquer the lands into Silesia. And so here there's something different that I want to talk about is the some Philippine of Prussia's philosophy, known as Immanuel Kant, who is a prominent figure of the era known as the Enlightenment, known for his contribution of epistemology, which is the theory of the knowledge, the ethics, and the aesthetics. He is best known for his critique of the pure reason and the categorical imperative, a key concept of his moral philosophy. A German philosopher, and who is one of the foremost thinkers of the Enlightenment, his comprehensive and systematic work in epistemology that I mentioned, and his ethics and theory, which he was also greatly influenced of his subsequent philosophy, especially in the various schools of Kantianism and idealism. Philosophy is his moral theory and ideology, which judges the actions and according to the whether they adhere to a valid rule rather than the outcomes of the action. Okay, and then there was leading also to the full Napoleonic Wars that basically that Prussia had joined the fourth coalition along with against Napoleon against the French Empire with who aligned with Austria, Russia, and Great Britain and the northern states of part of the northern states of Italy. That basically growing into the defeat, and that basically the Prussia joined in the war, but they were defeated basically that with alongside with Austria. They're defeated basically by the French, and that the Prussians were even defeated by the at the Battle of Jena and Austerlitz before they moved their French troops under capture into the city of Berlin. Before then, that's where the Prussians were then had to agree with surrender that the defeat of the Austrian and the establishment of the Confederation of the Rhine, and that basically that marked the end of the Holy Roman Empire by that Francis II had to that by Francis II, and that they basically that was part of Napoleon's basically to spread over his revolutionary ideas such as abolishing the monarchy as well as the codes into law, and like basically getting a lot of educational reforms and basically expansion over who was a fan of the basically republicanism. And the defeat of the Prussian has shattered, and the remnants of the army and the royal family had to fled to East Prussia. But the Treaty of Tilsit in July of 1807, the Treaty of Tilsit ended the war with the Prussian losing nearly all of loss of its territory. Forces limited its army into to 42,000 soldiers, and pay a large war indemnity. And so basically, the after the Napoleonic Wars, the treaty of the Congress of Vienna was basically had to sign. They basically that brought the basically the board that fixed all the mess that had happened, and the bit that Austria that bros like basically to refix all its borders that it once was before the Napoleonic Wars. But this had caused like basically a lot of problems, such as nationalism that basically grew throughout the European engulfed throughout the European continent, that basically revolted into many social, political, and economical changes, and revolted to become their own countries. And so the Prussians had basically expanded the territories exchanged for the turn to gain from the territories from the Rhineland, including and Westphalia, former the Duchy of Warsaw, and Austria had gained much of northern Italy. And whilst the Russians had also gained the kingdom of Poland, and also the Ottomans had taken over the Crimea and also Westphalia and Moldova, and The 1848 revolution, Prussia, like much of Europe, experienced revolutions of the 1848 revolution, with citizens in Berlin demanding reforms, including the constitution and freedom of the press, in which King Frederick William IV initially conceded to, but later suppressed the movement. And then, like many other European powers like Austria, basically, like they also faced the 1848 revolution, basically of educational reforms and the national and linguistic lines, which is bad for the Austro-Hungarian since they're pretty diverse because of like basically of Poles, Hungarians, Czechs, Slovaks, and Ukrainians at times, Pole, Romanians, and so on and so forth, in which the Hungarians had led to the revolution, a big breakout of Austria, which is basically that the Austrians were then threatened, and they asked their neighbors Russia, to basically help the revolt, in which they basically seceded and crushed the Hungarian revolt. And so the German, so the basically the German Empire has then now also had been after the 1848 revolution. It basically had grown up into its power by defeating their neighbors of the Austrian Empire, as well as also defeating when sometimes allying with the Austrians to take part before they divided the regions of Schleswig of Holstein, where it's meant to be part of Denmark, due to the rise of German nationalism, and that they're basically, I think, the German that the Prussia and the Austria got intervened into the war, and that Austria didn't like basically after the Second Silesian War because of basically that it divided over the Austrian lands, and this also led to basic conflicts that also basically within the German Confederation, and that basically that Germany then had to declare war on both Austria, and then later fought a war against Denmark, which they gave the province of Schleswig and Holstein, and later also had to declare war on France, which later led to the Franco-Prussian War from 1870 till 1871. That the French were crushed by the Germans, that they were losing men and they're losing their morale, and that they're losing the battle of ammunition, and basically that the German chancellor, that Otto von Bismarck, before the war at the time, they basically sent the start of the war was that the Otto von Bismarck sent a telegram to Prussia saying that the French Emperor Napoleon III is feeling a lot weak, and what led to that war. But again, France had already lost the war, and basically that they agreed for France that weakened its military power, and that they also had to gain up also Alsace-Lorraine to the Germany before they then to evolved into what is now the German Empire by 1871. All right, so we're now gonna hear. So we're learning after the German unification. So here we're learning about another German philosopher known as George William Friedrich Hegel. With those who don't know, he was one of the prominent German philosophers for his systematic and comprehensive approach to philosophy, particularly his dialectical method and focus on history and the development of ideas. He developed a comprehensive philosophical system that addressed logic, nature, and the spirit, with all the particular emphasis on the historical and social aspects of human nature. Hegel's phenomenology of spirit has been one of the most important works of philosophy since the 19th century, while the question of energy has been crucial of life in the 21st century. And I've also put down YouTube links. I'll also put others and everything else. Again, I'll put them all into the description below. That way you guys can check them out below, everything that I posted and that I made to this presentation. So here we go. Okay, so and here the Weimar Republic and the abolition. So after the First World War, the German Empire had been defeated, and once the USA had joined the war, after they launched their final counterattack with launched their massive artillery barrage, that the Germans were losing the supplies, and yeah, the Allies were getting a lot more supplies that were getting, and the final push that basically the supplies and those the morale and the supplies that the Germans had basically led to very free back into the as well as all the Central Powers, which Bulgaria fall first, followed by the Ottoman Empire, then Austria-Hungary, and finally Germany had to surrender. And by then, the Treaty of Versailles and peace negotiations, Germany had to basically send a lot of basically war preparations as well as face like basically like a bunch of like depths and also basically demilitarize its own military, could not allow an air force, and they had to give up also their colonies and also lose pretty much their territory and basically and also like that basically the and also for basically for Woodrow Wilson of the U.S. to basically establish like in the Versailles Conference to basically establish the League of Nations that basically that was basically a treaty organization to keep the countries of basically the peace and to the organizations of basically whatever countries are going to attack and it, but that 14 points is not going to the League of Nations was because despite that the USA did not actually join the League of Nations, but that peace organization it did not maintain peace because later Nazi Germany would then invade Poland and World War II would start. So, but here after World War One, Prussia stayed land within the Weimar Republic. Prussia lost its royalty and governed by its own diet. In the 1932, Chancellor von Papen and Paul von Hindenburg issued a decree simply dissolving the Prussian state government. Von Papen is charged of the state, but he does not last in the Weimar Republic because the Nazi government had formed into new states known as the Gau, in which is like multiple new different German states in 1934. This is what that marked the end of Prussia as a single territorial unit, and it was also abolished by the Allies' Control Council in 1947 after the Second World War, because before then, Otto Braun, by the Allies, when Germany was divided between the French, British, U.S., and the Soviet Union after World War II, the Otto Braun has basically had asked the Allies had tried to basically to restore the Prussian state back, but the Allies had simply said no because of basically of concerns of like basically if Prussia would have been like basically would rise back, it would basically we would become way more a lot more powerful than it was been before. And that's pretty much it. You got and I've also basically posted also these YouTube links, but for these YouTube links, I might be making probably plan on making do a reaction sooner. So that's pretty much it. So you guys can check out these videos, including what happened to Prussia, Frederick the Great and the rise of Prussia, and the way Prussia loses from territory from Poland. Why did Denmark defeat Prussia in the 1848, and was the Prussian army the best, and with the Franco-Prussian War? Because one thing to note that I like to mention is also how Denmark defeated Prussia is basically not basically by the military strength, but also basically through peace negotiations. Basically, if Germany like Prussia would have basically attacked Denmark, it would basically lead to war with basically all other European countries, which is what Prussia didn't want, and so that's why they basically had to sign basically a treaty in that year, and that which then later gained Denmark to basically lose all these territories. That was before Austria and Prussia again intervened with the territories of Schleswig and Holstein. And so yeah, that was basically my whole presentation of the Kingdom of Prussia. I hope you guys basically enjoyed it, and if you guys did, and if you want to see me want to do more content like this, like soon I might maybe plan on maybe watch do a reaction soon on the historical YouTube videos like the History Matters and all the other YouTube channels and everything. But I'll send you the YouTube videos and the articles and everything else. They're all linked in the description of all the sources and everything that I looked up to make this presentation. But I hope you guys enjoyed it. If you want to still see more historical content like this, then what are you waiting for? Please be sure to like, subscribe to my channel. Don't forget to comment and turn on my bell notifications. That way you get notified by every video that I'll be posting in the channel. And yeah, I'll see you guys in my next video. So, Mr. Aaron's out. Peace.